Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
All right, welcome everyone. Of course, actually anyone attending or who's been on here probably has been hearing me and Jennifer talk the last couple months. I just realized I did not mute Yeah, you would have heard us for the last couple months, but yeah, that's the way how life goes. Just a little bit of chit chat before. Hope everyone's has been having a great day. Of course, I feel like I just got off Twitch. I was on here just a couple hours ago. I will say, hopefully, and I am hearing some background noise, so it might be. Hopefully, you do not hear my fan going too much. I did have my my thermostat broke today. Brand new thermostat just got installed Saturday. And they're in here reinstalling everything today, right now. Hopefully, because it's all tied to my alarm system and everything, and I've been hearing noises come from outside. Hopefully, we don't hear any of those noises during all this. We'll just see how it goes. So today, I've got this is a double hitter. Starting off with Jenn Robison. Really looking forward to this. Jenn will be one of the people who I've not met before. Probably 90% of the speakers I've met at some point in time. But the awesome part about Code PaLOusa is you always get to meet all these great people. It was interesting. I was looking up Jenn earlier today, and I actually got confused because so the company she works for happens to have an office here in Louisville, and I was like, "Are you here in Louisville, or are you in Portland, like your Twitter says?" I said, "Oh no, I live in Portland. I just happen to have a company that is also located in here." So unfortunately, I won't get to meet in person. This will be the most, well, hopefully I get to talk to you during Code PaLOusa, but it has to be virtual, just like everything else is this year. Everything's just virtual. But it's awesome. So welcome. Quickly, give us a quick introduction to who Jenn is.
Thanks, Chad. So I'm a full stack developer. I live in Southern Oregon, about 3 hours south of Portland metro area in Oregon. I am a mom. I have 3 kids. I've been doing development for over 15 years. So I've seen a lot of iterations. I've gone from, way back in the day when I was really first starting to learn, just HTML, added a little JavaScript, got really full stack, .NET, got into the JavaScript frameworks with like Knockout.js and Angular, got into TypeScript, and then took a leap a few years ago and got into mobile development with ReactNative, but continued the full stack approach with everything from the APIs to the database and serving up the front end.
So you've been really enjoying React?
I have. So I haven't done a lot of React with web, but there's a lot of similarities with React Native. Some of my biggest learnings with the mobile side with React Native is just the DOM elements, being named differently. When I first started doing React Native, I really missed, CSS and some of the ways you could have more global styling that applied through your site, and that doesn't really work that way in React Native, at least. So figuring out ways to be able to repurpose your code and not have the same bits of styles and things like that in every view.
Yep, I gotta so I've never fooled with Rust. With React, actually, it's because there's a comment from Rustic 90.
Yeah.
I'd be willing to put this Rust Faustino, who's our next interview. But so I saw that and that was in my head. But with React, actually, I don't know anyone who's done Rust yet. But sure, every time I talk to people who've done React, they really enjoy it. They really like what it can do, and but it's I do find it interesting in that sense.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome to be able to take anything you learn in JavaScript and TypeScript and be able to take those base ideas and start to apply that to a completely different platform and go from being web and desktop to being able to deploy apps into the app stores for both iOS and Android. It's pretty awesome.
So, I mean, are you finding that works well? Because I mean, sure enough, like, you know, so where I'm at, we were using NativeScript, and we had to dump it because it was just causing us so many problems. And we actually just finished rewriting our apps natively.
Okay.
But
yeah, I don't have any personal experience using NativeScript, but React Native itself has worked fairly well, in my opinion. You know, there's some nuances. It's still, you know, even though it's been around for several years now, it's still not a 1.0, you know, official release, which is like crazy.
Well, it's JavaScript. Why should
Yeah. So we're at like 0.63 now, I think. And I think the biggest challenges are when you get into, you know, integrating with some of the native modules. So you want to use a camera, you want to use a file picker, you want to do some of those things. Obviously, that works different for, you know, Android and iOS. I think React Native has done a really good job being able to link into those libraries. And a lot of it is automated for you. Yeah. So, you know, you touch the native code a little bit, you know, in some of the setup and for very specific features like, you know, notifications and things like that. But otherwise, it's actually pretty decent.
Cool. So, I mean, getting back to you, I mean, so how did you get started in technology?
So my mom was a COBOL programmer when I was a kid. I think my first introduction to really like playing around with programming was, you know, on my Tandy computer hooked up to my TV when I was, you know, like 6, I think. And I'd make it sing and change colors on the screen. And that progressed into kind of playing around with DOS programming. Never thought I'd be a developer, honestly. I started working at Intel when I was a teenager. And I was actually an administrative assistant and started taking on web design, web development, you know, early 2000s, like every organization internally had their own team website and things like that. So I got into really more the WYSIWYG editors, learning Front Page and Dreamweaver and all of that. And as we got into more complexity of like, oh, we want employee lookups and things like that, I started getting into JavaScript. And I go, well, I might as well just, you know, get a degree on this. So I got an associate's degree, and I actually was working through, I became a business analyst and then got into the technical side of programming on an ASP application internally, which had a SQL database, and just started really learning on the job and got my degree after the fact.
Well, cool.
So, yeah.
So I mean, I got to. So is your mom still a COBOL developer, or is she one of the few that actually retired?
She retired actually after Y2K.
Oh, okay. And stayed
but
retired?
It's funny. What was that?
Has stayed retired?
She has. I've actually had conversations with her in the last like year, especially even after like all of this with COVID and, you know, the call for COBOL programmers. I'm like, Mom, you could make so much money.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of work for TMD for many years, and you know, we had that group of COBOL developers, and you know, they were all well past their prime, but you know, but as far as comparatively age, right? But they were you know, they ruled the world because they're and I was actually just about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 months ago, I was talking to someone out there and talking about how hard they're going to have it, you know, when those guys actually finally retire, you know, really retire, right? You know, I think all of them consider themselves partially retired. It's always funny because, like, you know, out of the Army, I wouldn't say they're dressed up. I mean, you know, but it's definitely slacks and usually button-down shirts or a polo shirt. Those guys were in Hawaiian shirts. And, you know, that's why you always knew who the COBOL programmers were in that area.
Yeah. I have a friend who recently just for Pluralsight did a whole thing on, you know, going through COBOL programming, you know, startup just to see what it was like. And I was like, I might have to do that just to know like what my mom went through, just to see.
Welcome to Tail Learn
There we go.
Code. How was your stream?
Awesome. Wow, we just got rated. So I don't know if you follow Twitch, but so rating is when your stream is done and you raid to another group. We just got rated by a bald bearded builder. I can never say his name straight. Brought in 92 folks. So awesome. Welcome, everyone.
Nice.
You haven't missed much. We just got started. I hope your all's stream was a lot of fun. Considering who you were with, I know it was because he always does a great job over there. So today we're interviewing Jenn Robison right now, who's going to be a Code PaLOUsa speaker. Yes, you see my Arcu canvas.
I almost commented on that earlier.
Yes, yeah, I have a couple, and actually that's not all of them because they don't all fit in my room.
Is that asteroids, actually?
Yeah, the first one you see is asteroids. Yes.
Yeah, I had that as a kid.
Thank you for following. Welcome to Tail Learn Code.
All right, we're gonna get some followers here. Thank you. Yes, thank you. YZB Dev. I hate
Thank
your
you for
names.
following. Welcome to Tail Learn
And,
Code.
iCruise Complex. Thank you for following. Thank you everyone for joining us. So sure enough, we
Thank you for following. Welcome to Tail Learn Code.
thank you, Code Hustle. So you don't hear all these, but these are blasting in my ears right now. So the funny part is the person I'm interviewing does not hear all the noise.
Thank you for following. Welcome to Tail
All
Learn
right,
Code.
Miss Moffy, thank you or Mr. Moffy, thank you for joining us or for following. So all right, so just a recap. We're interviewing Code PaLOUsa speakers. So for those who don't know, I run Code PaLOUsa, which is an annual conference. I definitely tell you to check it out. I'm going to give a link because we have so many people coming out on here. Sounds like from Death Race. Yeah, I really like the voiceovers I've got for this. Again, you have no idea what I'm talking about because you don't hear these.
I've listened to a few of the streams, so I have heard them.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes. So great. So part of what we're doing for Code PaLOUsa, we're interviewing speakers, and it's also giving me great content, right? I mean, these are awesome people who give up their time, because most of them, this is something they do on the side. It's something they want to do. They have a regular day job, and so I wanted to interview these folks. And today we're interviewing Jenn Robison. So we were just hearing, we just heard about how Jenn got started in her career. This is what I need. Awesome. Code Hustle. Thank you for saying that. I do appreciate that. Code PaLOUsa is one of the. It's interesting. So, and Jenn and I were talking about this right before the stream.
Thank you for following. Welcome to Tail Learn Code.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Raffle. I'm horrible at pronouncing names. We were talking about this before. Code PaLOUsa is one of the few community conferences that has decided to go virtual. Although I'm starting to see some who this fall are going to try to do go virtually. It was interesting because we were doing our call for speakers. The deadline is August 19th when we start. The deadline for registration. Actually, technically, you can register anytime during Code PaLOUsa. So actually the 21st. And most sessions, there's just a couple that will not, but most sessions will be recorded. So if you are an attendee, you can watch the recordings afterwards. We were talking about, it's Code PaLOUsa is one of the few that's still going to be around, because I was determined to still have a conference, and it was weird because we were doing our call for speakers in March, and I remember it was very well because it started off with, all right, we're still going to be in person. It should be all cleared up by then. And it was, well, maybe we'll do a hybrid event. And this is still why we're doing call for speakers, right? And then, yes, Mr. Smallfy, I really do need to fix the SSL certificate. I need to fix that. We still do not have an SSL certificate on the Code PaLOUsa website. With that being said, we don't take any information on it, which is why I kind of been delaying getting it done, but I do need to do that. Sorry. Now that's focus back on what we're here for. So we're talking about how you got started in your career and everything. I mean, what do you find is the most exciting part of your job?
I love solving problems and building relationships. So one of the things I actually didn't mention about myself is I'm actually also an EMT.
I was going to ask you about that.
I was a volunteer firefighter for up until I moved about 9 months ago. I was part of the volunteer fire department where I lived previously. And so I love helping people. It's just part of my nature. And I love being able to understand like the landscape. So one of the things I love about programming and tech is being able to ask all the why questions, the 5 whys, right? And getting down to like, what are you actually trying to accomplish? What are you trying to solve? So you just get to experience so many different things. Through the years, I've been exposed to so many different problem spaces. And one of the things I really like about my current role is that we get to work with so many different clients, and I get the opportunity, I've had the opportunity over the last several months of being able to even work in the healthcare space. So taking my knowledge as a responder and being able to help, shape the direction for an application that's out there today.
Awesome. Well, sure enough, so we got Code Hustle on here, who's a volunteer firefighter for 4 years in New York. So
awesome.
Definitely, like Sean said, thank you for service. Thank you, Jenn, for your service. I mean, that's you're actually the second speaker I've known who has been a EMT, at the very least EMT. Have you ever met Phil Japiski?
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, so he's out of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
And remember his Twitter handle is Ski Medic. Because he was also a volunteer ski patrol.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And an EMT. I mean, he actually retired EMT. That's how long he was doing that.
Yeah. Someday I'll be a nurse. That's my goal, actually, is to go back to school and get my RN. Yeah, kind of crazy. People look at me like, but wait, you're a programmer. I'm like, yeah, I'm complicated.
That is definitely a big divergence from software development, right?
Yeah.
So just a general nurse or looking to specialize in the area?
I mean, my dream job actually would be a flight nurse. So think life flight, so traumatic, which plays into the EMT. When I was younger, I thought I wanted to be a trauma surgeon. And when I graduated high school and got my EMT, I was like, wait, I definitely enjoy the relationship and patient care aspect more than I want to just be in the room, performing surgery or diagnosing and then out of the room. Like, I really enjoy getting to know people. I've had some really great experiences with like long transport times where, you really get to like know somebody and help them in a time of need. So.
That's cool. I mean, do you find yourself to be more of a thrill junkie, Because that's what it kind of sounds like, right?
I mean, maybe a little bit. So another fun fact about me is I ride a Harley.
I saw those pictures on Twitter. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe I definitely I have a healthy fear, but I enjoy pushing the limits for sure.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I mean, that's what I love about speaking and running conferences, because you get to meet so many different kind of people. I mean, it's, most people, you're definitely different than most people in technology. Most people are introverted, quiet, I would say plenty of people take risks, but, not so vocal about it sometimes. That's awesome. And then you love teaching, right? Which is great. So because so you speak at conferences. I saw that you've at least taught at middle schools before.
I have. I've done coding classes at middle schools in this last year since I moved, where I'm actually in a pretty rural area. So I was super excited when I walked into the library with my kids and saw that they had a Girls Who Code program.
Cool.
And I was like, tell me more. Their focus right now is 3rd through 5th grade girls because they didn't have computers to be able to do the high school age and middle school age program. But I helped them get a grant actually this spring, and then COVID hit. So we haven't been able to actually start the program yet, but we're hoping whenever things start to really open back up, to be able to reach more and more kids in the community.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love mentoring in general. Again, it comes back to relationships, right? I just love working with people.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really cool. So also, I mean, again, looking at your profile, so you talked a lot about Agile, and what I gathered from reading your profile, you really, really enjoy Agile. So
I have. It was kind of life-changing, actually, when it started, and when I realized what was happening, I was like, well, this is kind of how I've been working anyways, even though it was being done somewhat waterfall. Intel was big in waterfall, and then they were like, let's be Agile, and they really had a hard time like kind of making that transition. But I had a manager who came in and was like, thou shalt pair program. We are doing Agile, and if you don't like it, I'll help you find a new job. And that approach was a little off-putting at first. So then I was, a little hesitant, but when I gave it a try and actually got into pair programming, and my learning accelerated exponentially from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really came to love it. So you can call it whatever you want. It just has become a lot of how I work. So I don't necessarily pair program, all day, every day where I'm at now, but we do get on and we pair up and we talk through problems and we really collaborate. And I just think it brings a lot of good process. And there's people that are too dogmatic about it, and I don't like to get into that space at all, but use what works and leave what doesn't.
So I know, just looking at some of the people who are watching us right now, I know some of these folks are new, right? And so sure enough, here in Louisville, you may or may not have heard of this, because, I mean, again, you work for a company that's got an office here. So we have a group called Code Louisville, and the idea behind Code Louisville, it's really to get people. Most people go through Code Louisville are starting their second or third career, right? They're trying to lift themselves up. Turns out a lot of them are like wait staff who are learning how to become a programmer and such. So what that means, I mean, so explain. I mean, what do we mean by pair programming?
So pair programming is where you have, into the technical terms or the pure definition, you have a driver and a navigator. So the driver is the person on the keyboard and really doing the actual hands-on programming, and the navigator is kind of talking them through the problem and talking about, this is what we need to do. But what happens is you just start having a conversation about, this is the feature we're going to deliver, and this is the approach I'm going to start taking. And you start to get the different perspectives, because we all come from different backgrounds and different experiences. So the way we approach problems and the way we think can be very different, and having to explain your approach and then also listening to other people's approach, you get to a better solution faster most of the time. They can also catch those pesky errors, like, oh, you have a typo there, or you missed a semicolon, things that you might not pick up on right away. So that's really how pair programming works. And you can have mob programming. I saw Code Hustle mention that in the stream. So mob programming is just where you have like an entire group of people, and that can work really well too. I've done code retreats, and I've facilitated code retreats, and I think it's just a great way to also practice and having to get out of your own head and be able to, it's that whole rubber duck too. Like you're talking it out, and so you find your pitfall before you actually get to it often.
No, I agree. I gotta admit, that's part of the reason why I do Twitch, right? Because I'm programming on here, and you really learn, just talking through it, right? I mean, sometimes the chat's pretty quiet, but just talking through it because I'm trying to explain as I go really makes a difference, and that's what pair programming gives you also. Plus, as a senior developer, I love using it as a teaching tool. Yeah. Right. Either where I'm trying to show them something brand new, so here's how I'm doing it. Watch me as I'm doing this, or even better, okay, you try to do it. I'm only going to help you when you really get stuck, right? But you got me over your shoulder. It's funny. The first time I did pair programming, I didn't even know what it was called, right? And it was I was put on a project, for a client, and we only had one computer between the two of us, and so we paired program. We had no idea what it was, and that like 3 weeks was like the most productive 3 weeks I think I've had in a long time. It was awesome.
It's interesting how people think like, oh, you have two people doing one thing now, so you've lost productivity. They think they're only going to get 50% output, but they don't understand the, like, you slow down to speed up, and when you catch problems so much earlier, and you actually reduce the bugs and defects and all of that, and just having better code coverage and coverage of a project. I learned early with that I was like, oh, okay, yes, I definitely see the value. But it's hard for management, especially, to see the value.
Well, that was the problem we were having. The CEO of our customer was kind of like, well, what is going on here, right?
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, we were working on it was for a chemical company, chemical and robotics, mixing those two together, and so we were having to do really big computative computations and everything. It was really hard. It was awesome having the two heads working on it. Of course, the code reviews were done right away because we done as you went. So I really we don't do it too much where I'm at right now, mostly because we're all remote, and so it's a little bit hard to do remote. I think it's still doable, but I don't know. I mean, have you done it remotely?
So when I did it, 90% of my team was in Arizona and I was in Oregon, and so for me, I was always pairing remote. Okay. And this was 8 years ago, maybe more now. I don't know. And we used real VNC at the time. It actually worked really well. When we pair now, we've been using, Slack for sharing. We actually just started using Pragly on our team, if you haven't heard of that. It's actually a really cool way to have kind of a virtual office for a remote team. Just drop in. If you're sharing your screen, it's kind of like Twitch in a way, but for your team, where you can just start live streaming like what you're working on. And so others can drop in and be like, oh, okay, like that's how that project's going. Oh, I want to learn that.
I'm gonna have to look at that more. That might be something we could use. So I'm curious, when you were saying you were working for a company in Arizona, was that still working for Intel?
That was when I was working for Intel.
So I'm curious, do you know Justin James?
That name does not sound familiar.
He's been in Intel for like forever, out of Arizona. Yeah. That's the reason why I asked. I mean,
okay.
Intel's only a couple people, right? So.
Right, I know. I used to love when people would be like, "Oh, I have a friend that works there. Do you know so and so?" And I'd be like, "You realize there's over 100,000 people there." Right.
I was just trying the off chance, just because I know he's. Yeah. I'm sure he's in Phoenix. I know he's in Arizona.
I think only twice that I've been asked that have I been like, "Yes, I know that person."
Right. Yeah. No, I used to work for HP, and I would get the same things. Oh, don't you know so and so? I'm like, you realize my division alone is 30,000 people, right? Near less the size of the company, right? So, I mean, we talked about Agile. Have you had any challenges with Agile? I mean, is there things that you don't like about it?
I think getting back into, some of the team agreements, and if certain people get too dogmatic about it, of like, well, the manifesto says blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, but also the manifesto says people over process, so really getting into like retrospect, like how your team's doing. And I think remembering that you don't have to take all the pieces. You can take just what works for you and the project you're working on. And so where I'm at now, because we are working for clients, depending upon the project and the size of the project, we're going to decide, we're going to work in sprints this time. Oh, we're going to work more Kanban style this time, and it's just kind of the team agreements of like what's going to work best for each project. So So overall, I feel like if people look at it as a flexible like framework, then you're not going to get the ridiculous overhead with it. But
that's exactly what Code Hustle was just saying. It should be very plug and play, and I agree.
Yeah.
I've implemented Agile, and then I get to people. Oh, well, you got to do this. Well, let's not worry about that yet. Let's try to just get something working first, right? Before we worry about all this pragmatic stuff.
Yeah, if you get too much into process, and process is good, obviously, but the company that I worked at previously, it got to be where we were in too many meetings, like more meetings than I had time to code. And I'd be like, so when do you expect me to get this feature out? Because now you want me in this grooming meeting and you want me in this planning meeting. And I'm like, how many meetings do we need?
So sure, there's a good question. Is Agile just a system to divide tasks up to people?
Not in my opinion. Agile is really like the framework in how you interact with each other, right? So I don't have the manifesto, memorized by any means, but there's all sorts of different pieces to it, and it's not just about dividing up tasks. That gets more into like Scrum or specific ways of implementing Agile.
Yeah, it is kind of a funny thing when people sell Agile. And I'm like, okay, well, what part of Agile are you trying to sell, right? Because Agile's not one thing, exactly. It's about culture change and mindset. Rustic 90, thank you for those questions, man. That's great.
Yeah.
I honestly would not have thought to ask that. Again, I've been doing Agile for so long. That's the other thing. I mean, Agile it's kind of weird because Agile's no longer the new thing, right? I remember it was the new thing.
There's always new buzzwords.
Now people are like, oh, I'm tired of Agile. Agile doesn't work, right? I'm like, well, again, because you're trying to be too pragmatic about it. That's the actual hard part. The easy tools and code are, I'll agree, mostly the easy part. Problem is we want to make tools work for this tool is going to make you agile, and I usually laugh when I see that. Haven't worked at coding. Sure. I mean, so Rusty 90, she mentioned, or I shouldn't say she. They mentioned earlier that they're a code level student, so it's someone who's actually I shouldn't say they're code level. They were someone who attended a panel I was on last week for new people looking to get into software development. So awesome. So any other thoughts you have about Agile? I mean, is it something you're trying to change with Agile, or?
I can't think of anything I'm like specifically trying to change. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot on like one of the projects I just wrapped up was making sure you have a follow-up. So if you're going to follow a part of Agile like retrospective, where at the end of every sprint or at a certain cadence, so for us it was every 2 weeks, we would talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what do we want to keep doing, what do we want to change. And one of the things that I have found worked well in the past was finding like a specific focus area. So maybe you lost sight of, doing unit tests or test-driven development or something and saying, hey, this is what we want to focus on, and then talking about it at your stand-ups, right? So as somebody is saying, this is what I did yesterday, and this is what I'm planning to do today, and if they're not talking about, I wrote some tests, you'd be like, did you write a test for that? And so it's just that way of accountability with each other to make sure that what we are talking about, we're actually having some follow-up instead of just having a retrospective, which really can become a vent session if things are frustrating, and then saying, these are our action items, and then never really following up with them, right? Because then it's kind of a wasted meeting at that point. So you really have to have that follow-up.
Well, more importantly, people won't be so open if you don't follow up. I mean, because I've seen this firsthand where you don't follow up, and then next time you do a retro, people are like, I'm not going to say anything because nothing's going to ever happen with it.
And on that same note, it's making sure that you have the the agreements in place, that it's also a safe place. Yes. Because in a previous position, we had our team retrospective, and we were talking about things that didn't go very well, and then that was shared at like 2 management levels above without any consultation of the team, and we all felt like our privacy, that what we had shared, it was not a safe place. And so then people shut down and stopped sharing. So
it's when I was out in the Army, there were people I would not allow, especially in the retro, but to other meetings, because it was just gonna be toxic, right? Because especially some of that just has to do with the way how government versus contractor relationships, but Yeah. Well, cool. Let's go back over towards React, which is as we were starting to talk about, it's where you've really been interested in a lot recently. And sure enough, so that's what you're going to be talking about at Code PaLOusa. So I mean, your title of your session's ReactNative, React CI, Rehab, starting with Detox. All right. Which I have never heard of Detox before. But reading this, so it's an automated end-to-end testing. Which is my big thing. I'm not a tester myself, but testing has saved my hide so many times.
Oh yeah.
So, start off with, what is the key takeaway out of that, for people to attend that session?
So one of the things that I was trying to bring with this session is like the importance of automated testing and getting to these are some of the options available to you with React Native. And given that React Native is a JavaScript framework, and it's cross-platform with iOS and Android, right? So you could get into native testing for iOS and native testing for Android, but then you need to be a native developer. And one of the things about React Native is you don't have to be a native developer in order to do mobile development. So just breaking it down and showing people that you can actually easily interact with the
Oh. Well, we're losing you here for a second, and it might be at my side because I got a thunderstorm going over. Yeah, I just lost her for a second. And sure enough, I do have a thunderstorm going over my house right now. Hopefully, we get her back.
Green.
All right, we did lose you there for a moment.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, and I was mentioning, I do have a thunderstorm going over my house, so it might be on my side. Yes.
So I was just saying, given the fact that it is a JavaScript framework and you want to be able to interact with multiple platforms, being able to easily do that and then have a repeatable method that says, I check in a new feature, it's making sure I didn't break anything, because I find that that's one of the things people forget about is to run the test locally before they actually put up a pull request or, want to merge in a new feature. So if you have that automated with your CI service, in this case, I'm going to focus really more on Circle CI. But, the ability to run those tests for both iOS and Android and say oh, yep, my core login feature still works. I can show my news feed. I can, get their profile, whatever it is that you want to have showcased and feel like are your most important features, the better.
Now, sure enough, is Detox tied to React, or is it just using React?
It is actually just gets linked into the native side. So as I was talking about earlier, when you have things that link into the native side, like the camera permissions, things like that, this does exactly that. It becomes a dev dependency. And then links into the native side. And Android, there's a little bit of setup, which is actually something that my company, we've been working on having a React Native template that does all the setup for you, because that's actually the most challenging part, is just getting it set up. Once it's set up, it's actually pretty easy to write your tests and interact. So I'll be sharing, the template that we have where you can start a new project, which has already some base components, some navigation already inserted into it. Detox is wired up, and you can actually run a simple test based on the template right out of the box.
And then now, is this, is this something you can easily pick up, or is there a lot of nuanced syntax for Detox, or is it pretty simple?
I think it's fairly straightforward, especially for people that are used to writing tests in Jest. So there's, expect, this element by an ID or by text or by value. It writes very much chained syntax. You create reference IDs for your elements, and then you can interact. The challenges come into play where if you need to scroll on the screen to a certain place because different devices have different heights and things like that. So that's where it gets into a little bit of the more interesting side, where it's like, oh, I need to scroll 50% or what have you. You have to play around with it a bit to see what ends up working.
I admit, I wouldn't even thought about that.
It's very interesting when I've seen this with designers that have done UX for web development for years, and then they're trying to do UX for mobile, and it doesn't function the same. You don't use drop downs in mobile, you use pickers, right. And you don't, it's funny when you start to see the differences and have to think differently of the interaction with the user. I can't, hover over an element to get information. I need to actually, touch it, things like that.
Yeah, no, it's always have fun when I'm talking to my mobile guys, because now again, as I joke, you don't want me designing any kind of UI, right? I build APIs, right? And that's where so it doesn't matter it does matter what it looks like, but it's a different what matter what it looks like. But it is always interesting when I talk to them, and on top of it, I mean, while there's similarities, there's still differences between iOS and Android. Which is why we have two different developers. One working on one and one on the other, because there's so much of a difference, or enough of a difference, I should say.
Yeah. So when you try and do cross-platform with one view of, say, okay, I'm writing this one screen for iOS and Android, and I want it to look pretty much pixel perfect for both devices without having to do much platform switching. So you can with React Native say, in iOS I wanted to do this, and in Android I wanted to do that. But obviously you try and stay away from that customization, because if you want to change something, then you have to change it in two places. In iOS, obviously, you have a lot fewer devices that you have to worry about. That ecosystem is so much more controlled than Android, where you have hundreds of variations of devices and varying, levels of people upgrading to the latest patch or, OS, and you have a lot more concerns you have to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if I heard you right, you actually have to worry about the different devices for your testing. Wow,
yeah.
That sounds crazy to me.
It's pretty interesting, because you like for Android you can specify, I want it to be the Pixel 2, and I want it to be Android 9 or 10 or whatever version you want. I want it to launch with certain permissions, or I don't want it to launch with permissions. With iOS, it's pretty much like latest OS.
Right.
Pick a device. They might have slightly different variations in the DPI, and if you go from like the 8 to the X, where you had the hard button versus the swipe, there was a bigger change there. But anymore, it's like, do I do the X or the 11 or the 11 Pro or the Max? They all pretty much look the same and function the same, so I don't have to worry about it as much.
But they still have different pixel densities, all right?
They do have different pixel densities. We use libraries that help us with theming, and say, like, they basically have the knowledge of the screen width and height and DPI and scale accordingly.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. And then I just want to make sure I understand it. So I could be building a regular native app, so I can do a Swing iOS app, but I can use Detox to test it?
So I don't know that you could do that.
Okay.
I think it is set up specific for React Native in that. Yeah. So it ties
then I misunderstood
to
something you said. And that's
okay. Yeah.
So
it does have the JavaScript side, and then it bridges in with the Swift.
Okay. I heard the native piece. I'm like, it's natively working on the device. That would have been really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, so it uses pods to tie in.
And I don't know what pods are. What is that?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess. So I'm not a native developer when it comes to that. So there's Cocoa Pods, which basically are, I would say, equivalent of like gems and in like Rails and that type of ecosystem, where it's the native packed code and ties into then the iOS. So they become a dependency of your application's project.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That sounds really cool. And again, like, I mean, we were, I think we were talking about this before everyone joined. React is definitely, I don't know if it's taking over the world, but it's definitely getting more and more popular. And like I was mentioning, I've yet to met a React developer that doesn't really, really enjoy it. And I can't say that about other frameworks, right? It's plenty of frameworks. So I got to work on it because there's nothing better, right? But the React community does seem to be very, very enthusiastic about it.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. So we use in my company, our tech stack is primarily React for the web and React Native for mobile. Mm-hmm. So it helps being able to go back and forth as well.
Okay.
Yeah, starting to get into the discovery phase of React Native is starting to offer where you're supposed to be able to take the same project and deploy for a Windows desktop app as well as a Mac OS app. So I'm really curious to see if you can have really one code base that can do it all.
Well, that's been the goal of a lot of different projects, right?
For years.
Now I'm curious, more in my role. I mean, have you fooled around with any of Xamarin?
Several years ago, I did fool around with Xamarin when it was fairly new. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, I came from a .NET. Yeah. I was a Microsoft developer, and so we started playing around with Xamarin when it was new, but I never really got into it heavily.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I've just done Hello Worlds, right? With Xamarin.
Yes.
Thank you for following. Welcome to Tail Learn Code.
Thank you. I hate internet names. Chartoli. Hope I'm saying it at least somewhat right. So thank you for following. I would say again, you never want me building a front end for anything. So and there's a comment. Xamarin will get a new lease of life with Maui and .NET 5. Now I will say this: it's really going to be Maui and .NET 6. So .NET 5 is going to set the stage for Maui, and this is something that changed. So originally, and I just happen to have more knowledge about this. So originally Maui was supposed to be 100% baked in .NET 5, but basically the pandemic happened, and they had to scale some things back. But what they're doing is .NET 5 will set the framework, for Maui, but it's really going to complete in .NET 6, which is just a year away, right? So it's not like you have to wait very long. Then they saw the core. Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, well, it is. I mean, because the big difference that's happening with it is that Xamarin actually gets migrated into the system namespace, so it won't be a separate namespace. Which is, I gotta admit. So at the MVP summit, which was in February, so I, again, I'm not a UI guy, but I think the thing I got the most excited for at the MVP was the Maui, the introduction to Maui. Of course, at that point, it was all secret. We weren't allowed to talk about it. It was really cool to see what they were doing at it. But actually, where I was going with that, I mean, even Microsoft is a big fan of React. I mean, plenty of teams are using React for their products. Rustic, definitely take C# as your second season or session. And once you take that, Blazor will make a lot of sense. Have you fooled around? Have you looked at the Blazor stuff?
I haven't personally, but I've definitely been following it. I definitely feel out of touch on the Microsoft side in the last few years. Sure. Up until I moved, when I was still more in the Portland area, I was attending a .NET users group still monthly, and .NET Core and all of that it's pretty exciting to see where Microsoft has come in the last few years,
Well, I love being a Microsoft developer because it's always changing. and everything. I will say, I mean, you're talking about, so you're no longer in the Portland area, but one of the nice things, I don't know about the Portland user groups, but a lot of user groups have gone online now because of the pandemic, which has just been awesome.
Yeah, they've done the same, and I have attended a couple sessions since they went virtual, which is nice because it was a really nice users group.
Mm-hmm. And sure, definitely check out C# Fritz. Also check out, let me do a shout out to Ed Charbonneau here real quick. Let me type this let me see if I can type Ed's name correctly. Now, there we go. Definitely check out Ed Charbonneau also. That's almost all he does. Why is it not? Oh, it would help if I put the bang in front of it. There we go. So Ed's actually, he's not right down the street, but not far from where I live. And he's been one of the big guys on that. Sure enough, Code PaLOusa, I'll share that also. Unfortunately, the shout out only works for me and my mods for obvious reasons. So awesome. Well, so I'm curious. So it sounds like you're busy. You do a lot of different things, right? You're the EMT. I mean, how do you balance all that and still have a life? I mean, you talked about you have 3 kids and.
Oh man, it can be tough.
I know you like getting on the Harley and.
Yeah, so especially now with the pandemic, right? It's become even harder to find the balance. Once my kids weren't in school, my work days, have had a lot more interruptions. I was working remotely before. But I always said, working from home was not a replacement for childcare.
Yeah, exactly.
And boy, am I living that now. My daughters are a little bit older, so they're pretty self-sufficient and doing their schoolwork, before it was summer break. My son is a little bit younger and he just needs more attention. So it becomes harder. But I definitely have tried to always disconnect from work, at the end of my workday. So my office is in a separate place from the rest.
And we're losing her again. Hopefully we won't lose her too long. We're losing the connection again. Hopefully this comes right back. I don't know. I'm kind of wondering about my connection, although I'm sitting on a gigabit connection. So.
Our living space.
There we go. You're back.
Yeah, I was like, wait, I lost you again.
And I now notice, I don't know how long this has been, I noticed your video got screwed up. Let me fix that real quick. It became really small. So, all right. Yeah, progressively in small spot. Sorry, everyone. I don't know how long it's been like that. I actually didn't notice. Because I'm looking right here. I got a chat screen right here. The video's over here. So I didn't notice that your video was getting smaller.
It's all right.
But, so all right. So you were talking about, so you have a separate, you have your separate office and.
Yeah. So I really try and really live the, I do my job and I'm really passionate about technology and a lot of things, but I have a lot of other passions and my family is really important. So when my workday is done, I really do check out. I try not to be on Slack or my email. I mean, they are on my phone. And if it becomes too much of a disruption, I will mute them. I will turn them off. So I try to be really present with my family. My kids are active in sports normally. So, a lot of times in the evenings, it's the hustle of getting homework done and getting dinner on the table and then off to sports. And, I love to be really present for that. And then on the weekend, depending upon what's going on, my husband and I will jump on our Harleys for, a day or a few hours and kind of break away for just the two of us. And then you might find us the next day hiking out in the woods with the kids. So It really just depends.
Awesome. So, something I forgot to ask early on, but you mentioned, in normal times. So, I mean, how badly has the pandemic affected you? And How bad is it in the area you're in?
I feel like in the Portland metro area, it's had a pretty big impact. In fact, where we had been living up until the end of last summer is actually what I would consider the hot zone for Oregon. Thankfully, we're 3 hours away from that now, and we're in a fairly rural area, so our cases are like, less than 100 still, which is really nice. I feel really pretty comfortable. And so, yes, it has had an impact on schools and things like that, but, we're going about the best we can, and I'm thankful. I mean, we're all in it, right? We're all living it. And like our company has been really good about saying even like these aren't normal work from home conditions, right? Like, yes, we all used to work from home, already, but this isn't normal. Some of my coworkers have, babies at home and are trying to like balance without childcare too. And I'm like, oh, thank goodness my kids are a little bit older,
right.
But they're still in my hair, So I think we all just have to be that much more like empathetic and understanding for everybody's situations.
Obviously, mine's 23 and she's still bugging me all the time. Actually, she's not bugging me all the time. The funniest part, and I've told this story several times on the stream, but she was home. She'd been home for about 2 or 3 weeks, and I was used to I've been working from home for a long time, right? So I was used to during the day. It was just me and the dog in the house. So I had music pumping, cranking through the speakers, and just working along. And she came down to me one day. She's like, Dad, you need to turn down the music. It's too loud. I just sat here like
Yeah.
But apparently
my oldest daughter called me on something the other day. She's like, Mom, you like never come up for lunch anymore. And I go, yeah, you're right. I just find like I'm trying to get done so that I can then get back up, to family life at the end of the day, get my work done. But I do need to be better about, taking a break, getting some fresh air, like interacting with them in the middle of the day for a minute. But I didn't used to have to worry about that either, right? They were at school. So I would just be in the zone and do my job, and that was it.
Now I'm curious, are your schools going back in session this fall, or?
We still don't know. Yeah, I've seen draft plans of like, for like my high schooler where, it'll be a hybrid model most likely where they might go 2 days a week and then be online 2 days a week with the option that if you want, you can be remote only. Same with my middle schooler. For my elementary, it's looking like they want to be fully in session, but it's all just drafts right now. We don't go back usually until after Labor Day. So unlike the Midwest. Yeah.
I was gonna say, like here in Kentucky, it's just it's not even a month away from school starting here.
Yeah.
They start in mid-August.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Which here apparently every county is going to be different, and it's going to be weird.
Yeah, that makes it really challenging for not only, parents, but employers trying to figure out like how do you manage the different expectations.
Oh yeah, and Rustic 90, thank you for joining us, and hopefully you join us another time. But I agree. It is difficult, right? I mean, I've said this many times, and I say this. I'm a member of a tech leader group, and talk about quarantine work is not the same thing as remote work, right? And I mean, because you have all the pressures of remote work, then you add in the fact that your family's all home and can't go anywhere. Right now, I mean, dealing with my employees, and I'm like, okay, you need to take a vacation, and they're like, well, where am I supposed to go? And I'm like, I don't know, but stop working, right?
Right.
I don't really care where you go.
I've had those discussions, yeah. Yep.
So although I'm the worst, and my boss gets me and says, well, where are you going? I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. Although, well, up until like 2 weeks ago, I was going to France in October. So I was like, I'm going to France. So that's, I'm taking time off for that, but that got canceled. So, well, it got postponed.
Yeah, I feel you. My husband and I always take a trip for a week in August, and we were supposed to go to Canada. We road trip, and we're like, all right, border's still closed. So now where are we going? We haven't decided.
Well, I guess the good part with most, I mean, you can still. Well, the nice part about most is you can any trip is a great trip, right? Because it's you know.
Yeah, we're really so usually when we do that trip, or we aren't on our motorcycles, but we'll take my husband's Jeep and we camp along the way and wherever. So we stay really, social distance, just us, and we're pretty self-contained and can go wherever we want and hike and see historical sites or whatever it is we end up doing. But.
Oh, cool. Well, so my last question I got for you is, I mean, any parting thoughts or inspiration to pass along?
I'm sad that Rustic 90 dropped off, because I would have loved to pass on some parting words for someone new in the field. But really, honestly, for anybody is, just have an appetite for learning. Never stop learning, because in technology, learning, you're irrelevant in a lot of ways, unless you're a COBOL programmer, I guess. But you just always have to be open to trying new things, learning new technologies, and looking at problems from different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. No, I really appreciate you joining me today. I especially appreciate that you were speaking at Code PaLOusa. I mean, I can tell you. Your session got picked for two different reasons. One, because it was React, and we don't get a whole lot of React talks, but also the testing aspect, right? It's like I said, I'm a big believer in getting things tested, because it really does save our hides more often than we think. I always tell everyone, just because you didn't find any bugs during test didn't mean that test was a waste of time. Because probably because you knew it was going to be tested, you found more things in development.
Yep.
It's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I'm going to say this. You're more than welcome to stick around. So basically, I've got a half hour till the next interview. And what I'm going to do, I was going to do some coding, but I think what I'm going to do instead, since we got so many folks, I'm going to turn this into an AMA. So I'll leave it up to you. You can either stick around, because I know Rustic 90 dropped off, but I'm sure we got some others who are new or have any other questions. I mean, I know Code Hustle was really interested in... sure enough, Code Hustle was talking a lot about React hooks. So
hooks are awesome.
So again, explain to someone who doesn't know React. What does that mean?
So it goes into what's called a functional component versus a class component, and I'll probably completely mess up. I don't have a pure definition by any means, but it just increases the power and the performance of your components and reusability. So you can have, state management with inside a view component of any type. And trying to think what else. So hooks can also be used for Apollo GraphQL queries and mutations and things like that. So it's just a way to programmatically have it all wired up in a nice format.
I mean, is it akin to a webhook? I mean, or is it something different than just a webhook?
I'm not sure if I would equate it or not. I don't want to answer that and say the wrong thing.
Sure. No. That's that's the problem. You're being broadcasted to all the people right now. Although I routinely make a fool of myself, so I'm not worried about it.
I mean, there's some really awesome things. So, I don't know how much Code Hustle's doing in React with hooks and what have you, or what type of backend they're tying into. But some of the recent projects I've been working on, we're using GraphQL for our API layer, and Apollo has some really awesome hooks that you can use. And with CodeGen, CODEGEN, so code generator, it can automatically basically read your schema, and you get strongly typed queries, mutations, your class, your entities, and it just creates a lot of power for just a stronger code base.
No, that's cool. I just started to look at GraphQL. I mean, I've heard about it for years, but I have a need for it, and I need to actually try to finish out that proof of concept. But I do find it very, very interesting.
Yeah, the project that I've been working on over the last several months. So one of the powers of GraphQL is you can, integrate multiple services into one environment, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a Postgres database that we're querying through our GraphQL, as well as a REST API, and actually 2 different REST APIs. And so we can then merge all of those different pieces together to serve up the content we need. And then you can have, similar to kind of like lazy loading, where depending upon when the individual queries your schema, if they include certain properties or not, then it will do the computations or pull the properties needed, from different spaces. So for example, like we have, a user object, and that comes directly out of our Postgres database. But then they want to see what their schedule is. Well, that's actually coming from, for events, that's actually coming from a totally different REST service. Mm-hmm. So if you add that portion of the object of the me query, then it will go off and tap into the other REST service in order to be able to pull that information.
Yeah, like I said, I've been really interested. I ran into Apollo a couple weeks ago. But I didn't really look into. What makes Apollo QL different than regular GraphQL?
I don't have a good answer for you on that one. I think it's just the because there's like Prisma and Apollo, and there's a couple different providers that that sit on top of GraphQL. Okay.
Yeah, I ran into him on Twitch one day, and actually I was looking who to raid next, and I ended up raiding them because like I said, I had been reading about GraphQL, reading more into it to actually start doing something with it.
Yeah.
Of course, admittedly, me and JavaScript don't mix very well. It's give me my C# any day. It's. Let's see here. So Apollo is a cache management layer that helps you connect your GraphQL request to your product. All right, great. All right, so basically it provides your caching. All right, that's awesome. So now
I think that's my buddy Ryan, and he knows a lot about it.
Well, that would make sense to me, right? Providing that additional layer of of cache into that. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious out there in chat. Anyone have a question for me, or more interestingly for Jenn? I'm boring, but Jenn's our firefighting EMT wannabe nurse software developer. Talk about an interesting bio there. But
yeah, when I went up on stage last summer for Chain React, that was one of the MC backstage. He's like, tell me something interesting that people wouldn't know. I'm like, I don't know. I'm pretty much an open book. And then I said, I rode a Harley, and he's like, what?
So what has been your favorite speaking engagement so far?
I actually think Chain React last summer. Just the community for React Native, it was a very organic, coming together where Infinite Red was like, hey, there is no community, conference for React Native. Mm-hmm. Let's put it together. And they're super welcoming. It's just a really awesome experience as a speaker and as an attendee. Mm-hmm. I was really, really looking forward to it again this July, but didn't happen. So I have it to look forward to next year.
Now, do they have MCs for all the talks or only certain talks? Because you talked about an MC.
Yeah, so they essentially had, everything was main stage.
Okay.
And so they had some, keynote and panel discussions, but they had an MC that would come in and introduce each speaker and do the transitions between sessions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've thought about trying to do it. And I grant you, Code PaLOusa, we normally have like 12 ongoing sessions, so that'd be a lot of MCs, trying to work everything. But I've also thought about trying to do like, like the entrance music. You know, tell me what your entrance music and have that play. Which, all right. So if you had an intro music, what would it be? What would be your?
Oh, man, I don't know. As I said earlier, I'm kind of complicated. I like all sorts of music. So like in high school, I actually got to where I was listening to a lot of oldies. You know, I like country music. I like pop. I like some rap, you know. Last night going to pick my daughter up from soccer, I was rolling with some old school Warren G. So, I mean, it really depends on the mood.
No, that's cool. That's cool. So, I'm just trying to think some questions while we're waiting for anything else to come up there. Oh, yeah. I'm sure I'm looking at my cheat list of questions, but are you a gadget person?
Yes, but I have a hard time like spending money on myself. So usually I end up with gadgets from my husband finally making the purchase for me. He's really the gadget guy.
What's the latest gadget you've been fooling with?
What have I been? Actually, I can't think of what. I don't think I've really gotten anything recently. It's been a little bit. I would love to get a telescope. I know that's not so much in the gadget space, but we're in a rural environment, and I can like so clearly see the stars, going outside at night, that I would love to just get my kids more into astronomy and being able to see more.
Yeah, you would definitely be able to see a lot more than like I would be able to. Well, here someone's saying programmable telescopes are super gadgets.
Yeah. My husband and I have been talking about building a ham repeater because we're in a dead zone. So I'm also a ham radio operator. So
I just love it. Just get also my hand operator.
Yeah. So Whiskey 3 Juliet Romeo Oscar. That's my call sign. So we've been talking about building a repeater, making kind of like our own little Radio Shack, and we've talked about like, do we want to do it with a Raspberry Pi, or do you want to do it with just an old laptop, or what it'd be fun to build one out. So APRS is a pretty cool technology for ham radio where it can track where you're pinging your tower, like depending upon the radio, like what the unit my husband has in his Jeep, like it'll tell you your speed if you let it report it, so it can actually really track where you're going.
Well, so you mentioned you're in a dead zone. I mean, I guess I didn't think there really was a dead zone anywhere with the ham radios. Yeah,
so we're not really in a dead zone, right? But there just aren't any local APRS towers.
Oh, okay.
Just nobody has put one up. And it could be we're in a more depressed area as far as economy and tech and things like that. So this is definitely not a tech center by any means. Sure. When I tell people that I meet from my kids' school, they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a software engineer," and they're like, "Oh, you're really smart, aren't you?" And I'm like, it's just they're not used to interacting with people in that space as much.
That's cool. So, I mean, what got you into the ham radio?
It was something my husband had always wanted to do as a kid, and when he went to take the test, or he was getting ready to take the test, and he's like, "Yeah, you should do it too." And I was like, "Okay." And so I studied and took the test, and it's helped a lot with radio communications in the fire department. It's helped us just personally, like if my husband wants to do a really remote hike, and I'm home with the kids, it's our only form of communication, and we can stay in contact. He's done some pretty remote hikes where I've dropped him, taken him to a drop-in spot, and the plan is to pick him up at a certain time the next day, but we just stay in contact and make sure everything's going as planned. And you can't do that in all places with cell phones. And I think people undervalue, that form of communication. In emergency services, if things go down, things go awry, a lot of departments have comms, setup that they're prepared to basically start relaying messages, if the dispatch centers aren't available. And I think people don't realize.
Yeah. I'm assuming, the number of ham operators has declined over the years.
Probably.
But, so I was about to, how active is it?
I think it depends on the area, I think it's almost something like passed down anymore. If somebody doesn't have like a real interest in it, where we were previously, there was a very active amateur radio group. When I was at Intel, they actually have a really active amateur radio group. They have towers on, or repeaters on some of the buildings because they wanted to make sure emergency communications can continue to happen for contingency. And then I think in more rural areas, it's still something that's more common. But I think in a lot of the metro areas, people don't necessarily know what it means anymore. When I had my call sign on my plate, people would be like, "What is that?" I'd be like, "It's my call sign." And they're like, "A what?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's like actually FCC registered,
Right.
And you have to follow the rules."
Mm-hmm. No, so it's like I said, it's interesting. I'm making an assumption, but I think it's a pretty good assumption that the number of operators, I'm sure, is down.
I would imagine.
As technology changes things, changes the way how we communicate. But sure enough, that is something that we do need to keep around, and not just so much, for the apocalyptic type things, right? I'm sure there's plenty of ham operators. That's why they're doing it. The preppers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. The preppers.
But I'm really. Like you talked about. When natural disasters happen and such. It's I lived in Florida for a long time, and you would have a hurricane come through and it would knock out all the cell towers, right? But or knock them down enough that cell service was spotty. It's the ham operators were still keeping that communication going during all that kind of stuff. It's so it is interesting. Not that I'm going to start getting. That's the last thing I need is another hobby.
Yeah. It gets hard to balance. There's always a give and take, right? It's like, oh, the super new, cool new thing. Like, wait, what's going to fall off now?
Yeah, that's part of the problem because you eventually have to give up on something.
Yeah.
I know I tried not to, but it's. And I probably don't let it naturally happen as quickly as it should. But.
Same.
Yeah. Well, I can tell because you're involved in everything, right?
Yeah, and I get up at insane hours. Like I get up at 4:30 in the morning just so I have a little bit of time to myself before I start my day. And it's hard to manage it.
Oh, that's funny. Now earlier you were getting really small. Now you got really big.
Oh. Taking over.
But literally, you just got really big. So it's funny. So are you? I'm assuming that means you don't go to bed late then? You're an early riser?
Not really. No, I'm an early bird, but I've always been an early bird. I like to start work by around 7 Pacific time and, be done with my day, usually by 4 and just get on with the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't sleep late, but I stay up really late. But I only sleep about somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. It just depends on the night.
Yeah.
But I've always been that way. It's just really not. It's not a good thing, but it's.
Yeah, I think I average probably around 6, but yeah, it's definitely not the ideal.
Well, I've definitely gotten a lot better, and I've joked about this before. I used to send emails at like 2:00 in the morning, and then I get up at 6. And I'm like, why haven't you responded to me yet? What's up with this, right? And I have to remember, oh yeah, well, you only slept for 3.5 hours last night. Everyone else isn't awake yet, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But although I do find as I get a little bit older, I sleep a little bit more. The hard part about getting old.
Yeah, there's always the change.
Mm-hmm. Well, awesome. Well, I because we're getting 10 till, I'm gonna. I really appreciate you sticking around for even longer.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I appreciate getting to know you a little more, and thanks for the opportunity.
And I do look forward to seeing you sometime when we can actually be, you know, at together at a conference instead of, you know, having to do it virtually.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, I do appreciate it, and I'll definitely talk to you later.
All right. Thank you, Chad.
All right, see ya.
All right.